Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local. So let's talk about one of the things that you added last year for the first time that I think is very interesting, because local ranking factors is a kind of a methodology to get to what is ultimately the objective, which is a conversion of some kind, a call, driving directions, a transaction. And so you included conversion factors last year for the first time, I believe, and you also had them in this year. Let's talk about that, as well as some local SEO myths and some strategies that might change depending on the business category that we're examining. So tell us about conversion factors.
Yeah, so I think I actually added conversion factors in 2020. I'd have to double check, but this was driven because this survey started as the local search ranking factors. How do you rank? But ranking often isn't great. It's like you can rank number one, but as Mike has coined the term, Google is your new homepage. A lot of people don't need to go to your website to select your business. The Google's local results are so feature rich now. You can learn a lot about a business. You never even have to visit their website. And so if you haven't taken the time to build out your Google business profile, it's like having a website with just your contact info on it. It's completely useless. And so conversions are very important. So a lot of these signals, they might not directly impact rankings, like using the Google posts and adding keywords to Google posts. It doesn't have an impact on ranking. Or having a really well written description. The description, keywords in the description doesn't impact rankings. We can talk about that in the myth section. Or filling out the product section, no impact on ranking, but they have a huge impact on conversion. So if someone's looking at your profile, they will spend more time on the profile. It helps someone really understand what your business is, what you offer, what you do, why they should choose you. Google posts are great for convincing people to choose you. And so these are very important conversion factors. And Google even provides direct conversion factors, like you could book right through your Google business profile if you turn on the booking feature, or messaging. You can turn on the messaging feature so people can ask you a question right through your Google business profile. So there are powerful conversion factors that were not being captured in the previous versions of the survey. So I wanted to make sure we had a section on that. And I wanted people to think about that.
An interesting question. I mean, I want to talk about what some of those factors are, but an interesting study, sort of separate study, would be by business category. Where are people converting directly from GBP or from the information on the SERP? And where are people clicking through to a website?
Yeah.
So and I would guess in categories like restaurants or even hotels, travel and hospitality, and maybe a few others, you're going to see a conversion coming directly from the SERP or the GBP listing. And in others, people are going to want to look at the underlying information on the website. They're going to want to go even deeper because maybe it's a higher consideration category or something like that. But it would be an interesting thing to look at.
That's the word, higher consideration category. So it's like I need a coffee shop that's nearby. You're not going to bother like investigating their website and reading all about their roasting processes. Not necessarily. It depends on how deep you are into coffee, but most people don't have to put that much consideration into it. But if you're looking for a lawyer to manage your estate, you're probably going to spend more time, or a financial advisor. You're going to want to really learn more about those businesses before you invest in it.
So let's talk a little bit about the conversion factors themselves. So what I was saying to you before we started recording was that last year it seemed like there were a lot more review related factors in the top group. This year they're still there, the top two, but fewer factors. What are the differences that you observed between last year and this year, kind of recognizing that the survey structure may have impacted some of this?
Yeah, so I think one of the really obvious ones that dropped in the importance for conversions was recency of reviews. It came in at number 5 in 2021, and it's dropped to number 11 in 2023. And I do think that this is not a reflection of its importance. I think it's more of a reflection of the restructuring of the survey. As I mentioned before, the previous version, you had to pick your top 20 and then sort them. This time, you just had to score each one in terms of its conversion score. And so I think a lot of these sort of shifts that we're seeing are more representative of the restructuring of the survey. Overall, when I compare these two tables, they look fairly similar, and there aren't really any huge takeaways for me that, oh, this is really important.
Well, how do you
This is
account
a
for
real
the
important shift.
how do you account for the I mean, we're also talking earlier about the absence of mobile responsive or mobile
Yes.
friendly website last year versus this year, where it shows up
Oh,
as number three.
yeah, this is actually pretty huge because last year, most people dragged their conversion factors because last year or 2021, I was asking people, what are the Google business profile conversion factors? That's a huge shift. I said specifically Google business profile conversion factors. So the 2021 list is really only looking at what's a conversion factor on your Google business profile. Now, conversion factors, you had to score every single factor, whether it was
Right.
a factor on your reviews, a factor related to your website. So now we're looking at local organic things that actually are factors on your website. So mobile responsiveness wasn't even an option last year. So that's why
Okay.
we're seeing that one come in. Another big one is having a dedicated page for each service. That's an important conversion factor from your website. Is and so now the conversion factor is more all encompassing, and so that's actually a pretty important thing to mention and a big insight into the difference here. So these are just conversion factors of how do you convert more people to pick up the phone and call your business, and it's not only limited to Google Business Profile signals anymore.
So let's talk about some of the myths. So this was a kind of a fun section that you previously included, local SEO myths. There are a lot of them running around. One of the valuable things here is debunking those. This year it's a little different because of the way that the survey was structured. So tell us about that, and then what are some of the findings around local SEO myths from this year?
Yeah. So last year, again, I said, hey, specifically, what are the things that don't impact rankings in any way at all? And this time around, I didn't even ask that question. I just left it off because I knew that anything that was scored as a zero doesn't impact rankings. And so we still get to actually, I think it's a bit more insightful because what someone thinks is a myth doesn't impact rankings. One of the other participants might know something that the other people don't. And so, some of these things that are kind of in positions, 13 to 15, whatever, like quantity of videos on Google Business Profile. We don't think that the quantity of videos directly impacts rankings, but some people gave it a bit of a score. It's like, oh yeah, that has some positive impact on rankings. Or keywords in Google Posts. Last year, it was just a straight up myth. This year, it got a low score of 24. So there are some people that think that having keywords in your Google Posts might have a positive impact on ranking, and whether they're right or not doesn't really matter. It's a survey of opinion, but it's I think it's a better way to look at what's a myth, because sometimes myths get debunked that we think it's a myth, but because last year it was I think we had using services on your Google Business Profile, and everybody said, "Oh yeah, that's a myth. It has no impact on ranking."
And this year,
And
Well,
this
there
year,
is a distinction here, though. I mean, Joy's look at was specifically services
predefined.
assigned by Google
Exactly.
automatically. In other words, their understanding of your business, which largely comes from their search stream and your website, right? This is
Yep.
not randomly generated. It does come from things that Google sees. And it's not which services you add, it's which services Google adds at a very granular level. It's sort of like the way to think about them is subcategories
Totally.
of where you work. And it makes sense to me that Google has been on this role of ever more granular understanding of a business. We saw this with products increasing visibility. If you carry a product and Google knows you carry the product and somebody searches for that product, they're going to show you. And
Yep.
it's the same with women-led businesses or black-owned businesses. These are attributes that are effectively subcategories, and every reason to believe it makes sense to me, sort of theoretically as well as practically, that they're important.
Yep.
Whereas if you add them, it may not be as important to Google because they don't
Yeah,
trust you.
Exactly.
I think there's a dedicated conversation that's very interesting to be had about the distinctions between the ranking factors and the conversion factors that you were going into, because I think that's really quite a significant discussion. I mean, the answer is you have to do everything well, right? You have to do the ranking
Right.
factors, you got to do the conversion factors. Everybody's got to do everything. Um, Tell us, you mentioned earlier that you disagreed with some of the findings, that there were some things in here, both in terms of positives and maybe less important findings that you kind of disagreed with. What are your thoughts
Yeah.
there?
Okay. So I think the one that I have maybe the biggest gripe with is number 9. So if it's made the top 10 in terms of local pack finder ranking factors, number 9, verified Google Business Profile. I think that has zero impact on ranking. So the idea here is that I have a Google Business Profile. Google already found it. It exists on Google. And the only thing I do is the act of claiming it, verifying it. I think that has zero impact on ranking. That profile will not rank any better than it did post verification than it did pre verification. So it's annoying to me to see this factor at number 9, and even more annoying that it moved up. It actually last year it was number 13. So I don't want people to be confused that that actually is a positive ranking factor, because I don't think it is. Someone prove it to me, because I've never seen the verification of a profile have any impact on ranking.
Well, one could argue that Google should make it a ranking factor because it would control for spam to a greater
Yes.
degree
Yeah, that's true.
potentially.
Yeah.
So a new category next year could be things that aren't ranking factors but should be.
Sure. I love
Perhaps.
that. Actually, that's a great idea.
So two comments here. One is that with a new business, it may be the only way to get Google to understand that the business exists. So in that sense,
Sure.
it is a
Brand.
ranking
Oh,
factor.
yeah. That's actually
The other
important.
is I was very proud of the rant you just made, and I believe that you're in the running to be renamed as the curmudgeon of local when I pass on. So just keep it in mind as a
The heir apparent.
objective. The heir apparent, yes. Good rant.
I'm just trying to learn from you, Mike.
So anything else you disagreed with, either on the upside or the downside, that you want to
Yeah,
mention?
well, one thing that's very related to that other one, I think that the real value of verifying your Google Business Profile is so that you can fill out your Google Business Profile. That's where the power is. It's like adding additional categories, adding additional predefined services, filling out all the stuff, increasing engagement and behavioral signals by adding photos. You can't do that until you verify. And so the real value is completeness of GBP. And I'm really annoyed that that one dropped this year. It was like last year, where did it come in? Completeness was like number 9 or something. And this year it dropped down to like number 12. And I was like, what? People, you got to reverse. And I think it's really just the nature of the survey. The survey structure changed this year, where you had to score every factor. And I think that we're just seeing these shifts because of that. And so that was another one that really bugged me.
Okay, so let's close out with sort of general advice, maybe, and Mike, feel free to chime in here, obviously, and then some industry specific differences. So I mean, this is an invaluable resource for people, notwithstanding whatever nuances around the survey structure impacting specific ranking position. This is kind of one place that you can come to get really up to speed immediately, in a very compressed period of time, on local SEO best practices. And so it's enormously valuable. But the takeaways are kind of horizontal, right? I mean, they don't pertain to any specific industry. But as we were discussing a little bit earlier, some people are going to convert just looking at the SERP or looking at GBP business profiles, whereas other people are going to do a lot more research and going to click through to the website. And so what advice would you give people to sort of on an industry specific basis? How should they, people who are doing healthcare optimization or legal or hospitality or restaurants, vets, whatever, how should they think about these factors?
Yeah, I would say that my default answer has always been that local search is mostly universal, aside from hotels. Hotels have their own actual algorithm that drives. And so the what impacts a local pack ranking for a dentist is the same as a coffee shop for the most part. Google doesn't really differentiate in the algorithm level, but I think, Mike, you had some really interesting comments about know your SERP, know your audience, and how are they engaging with the SERP results and search results. Because in some industries, people might care more about the organics or more about the local services ads or more about the local pack. So I think you have some thoughts on that, Mike.
Well, just what Greg called high consideration searches. I think that people perceive the cost of searching and the determining a result differently, and it ranges from coffee, as you mentioned. I think something in the middle is something like jewelry, where if you're just going to choose to visit a store and then make a decision, there is some cost, but not a tremendous cost to that, right? Whereas if you're looking for a divorce lawyer or a DWI lawyer that you can't ask your friends for recommendation, then there's huge costs there. And so as the cost goes up, I believe that the value of organic goes up proportionately. So I think that people need to understand that. Also, what we saw in some of our research and in terms of search optimization research, we saw that when LSAs were available, they had a much bigger impact. Overall, their impact isn't that great because they don't show on that many searches. But when they do show, there was a big impact. So you need to understand where they show, when they show. Also, which key phrases are generating packs and which ones aren't, because that's going to matter. And then, worrying about your organic slightly differently, because what we saw, or what I saw, is that people all are using the same dumb title tags and the same descriptions, and you need to make your SERPs stand out to get that. When a high consideration search gets there, people have got to be motivated to take an action, and I think that title tags and descriptions are largely neglected, and that's unfortunate.
That's a great point. That's a really great point. My general advice with title tags and description, well, title tags in particular, is make the first part of it, the first 60 characters, very compelling, and don't worry about the ellipses. You can get all of your keyword stuffing in after the ... that Google trails off. And I think Joel Headley proved that at a local U conference, that Google doesn't care how long your title tag is, and that keywords that are trailed off, that aren't actually visible at the front part, still provide a ranking benefit. So that's where I like to do.
And it's different on mobile and desktop too. 60
Exactly.
is a desktop number, and a lot of searches are switching over to mobile, so it's still it changes. But anyways.
Yep. So as a final question, before we adjourn here, and we've spent a lot of time talking about a lot of aspects of the survey, but we of course haven't covered it exhaustively. How should people actually use this? So for people who are doing local SEO or need to do it but aren't themselves experts, or even people that consider themselves experts, how do you use this as a practical matter beyond just like reading it and thinking, that's quite interesting, and then moving on? What is the practical application of this?
That's a great question, and I think it's one that I haven't given a lot of thought to prior to being asked that question. But if I was just a small business and I was like, okay, I've got this resource, it's big, I got to spend a lot of time digging through it, I would say definitely get the top ranking factors, like what you see in the top 1 through 10. Those are your table stakes. Then focus on the things in positions 11 through 30. That's where a lot of real gold is. That's going to be a competitive differentiator to help you rank better. So the general local pack finder ranking factors is very valuable for that. Then you should look at the conversion factors. I think go through the conversion factors. So just because it didn't make hey, this impacts my rankings list, these are things that actually have a very positive impact on just how many calls you're going to drive from your Google business profile. If your industry has local services ads, you probably want to get in there because they are driving a ton of clicks. They're stealing traffic from the organic results. So if you have the budget, it's worth doing it. And so I would definitely recommend that you look at the local service ads ranking factors. I would say look at the suspension risk factors. Just make sure you're not doing anything for suspension. So it kind of gives you this nice structure of what do you need to do. It kind of gives you your to-do list of improving your local rankings and your conversions and avoiding any particular problems.
Okay, Mike, any final words before we
No, it's just a pleasure having you on, and thank you very much for joining us. I really appreciate you taking this time.
Yeah, it was really really great discussion, Darren. Thanks for your insights
Thanks.
and your time, and we'll talk to you anytime. So again, thanks for joining us, and for all of you listening, tell your friends, subscribe to our newsletter, and we will see you next week for episode 108, wherein David Mim will return.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.